Cuba, in the 1950s, was a land of stark contrasts. Havana, the capital, pulsed with a vibrant nightlife and casinos that attracted wealthy Americans. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity, most Cubans endured grinding poverty. The island nation was ruled by Fulgencio Batista, a military strongman who had seized power in a coup. Batista's regime was notorious for its corruption and brutality. It catered to the interests of foreign corporations and a small Cuban elite, while the majority of Cubans struggled to survive. This inequality fueled widespread discontent, particularly among students and intellectuals. They saw Batista's regime as a puppet of the United States, which had long exerted significant economic and political influence over Cuba. The U.S. had supported Batista's rise to power and continued to back his dictatorship, viewing him as a bulwark against communism in the Caribbean. This perception of foreign domination further inflamed Cuban nationalism and resentment towards the Batista regime. On July 26, 1953, a group of young revolutionaries led by Fidel Castro attacked the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba. Their goal was to spark a popular uprising against Batista, but the attack failed, and many of the rebels, including Castro and his brother Raúl, were captured. The Moncada attack, though a tactical defeat, proved to be a pivotal moment in Cuban history. It thrust Fidel Castro into the national spotlight and provided a powerful symbol of resistance against the Batista dictatorship. After spending nearly 2 years in prison, Fidel and Raúl Castro were released under an amnesty deal. They immediately went into exile in Mexico, where they regrouped and planned their next move. It was in Mexico that they met Ernesto Che Guevara, an Argentine doctor who shared their revolutionary ideals. In 1956, Castro, Guevara, and 80 other revolutionaries set sail for Cuba aboard a small yacht named Granma. Their landing was disastrous, and they were quickly dispersed by Batista's forces. However, a small group, including the Castro brothers and Che Guevara, managed to escape into the Sierra Maestra Mountains. From their mountain stronghold, Castro's guerrillas waged a relentless campaign against Batista's army. They gained popular support by promising land redistribution, social justice, and an end to corruption. As the rebels gained momentum, Batista's regime began to crumble. On January 1, 1959, Batista fled Cuba, and Castro's forces triumphantly entered Havana. The Cuban Revolution had triumphed. The new revolutionary government, led by Fidel Castro, moved swiftly to implement its socialist agenda. Vast estates were confiscated and redistributed to peasants. Foreign-owned businesses, including banks and sugar mills, were nationalized. Education and healthcare were made free and accessible to all Cubans. These radical reforms transformed Cuban society, but they also came at a cost. The Cuban Revolution sent shockwaves throughout the world, particularly in the United States. The Eisenhower administration, already wary of Castro's leftist leanings, viewed the revolution as a threat to American interests in the region. The U.S. responded with economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, pushing Cuba further into the arms of the Soviet Union. The Cold War had come to the Caribbean. In 1961, the U.S. backed a disastrous invasion of Cuba by Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs. The invasion failed miserably, further strengthening Castro's grip on power and pushing Cuba closer to the Soviet Union. The following year, the world held its breath during the Cuban Missile Crisis, as the U.S. and the Soviet Union teetered on the brink of nuclear war over the placement of Soviet missiles in Cuba. The crisis was eventually averted, but it underscored the global significance of the Cuban Revolution.